By the way, I wanted to ask, did your cubby chubby return after last night's
It was
performance?
great to see, and like you know how I feel about Christopher Morel. I was texting Friedel. I had a long text chat with Friedel. Friedel all of a sudden comes from the top rope, and he always gets me when you know my dauber's down in your terms about the Cubs. He's in San Diego. He takes this trip every year. I promised that we would take the trip next year together. He never really invited me, first of all. And he's like, when are you going to come out on this trip with me? And I go, well, you've never really invited me on this trip. I go, I'll make it happen next year.
He showed his face after they dropped an 8-zip lead, right? And that's when he come out of the weeds?
That's what I'm saying. So, like, all of a sudden, yesterday, he's texting me and saying, the Cubs don't really have any stars on this team. Like, out of the blue, like, right as the Cubs game's about to start. The Cubs, or any team for that matter, in Chicago, they don't really have any stars. And I'm like, you know, first of all, the Cubs have a lot of good players, and they're not fully there yet. They have a lot of their young guys haven't come up yet. For instance, their pitching, they still have some of their young arms. Cade Horton is going to be one of their better pitching prospects that coming up. Ben Brown has pitched in his last 2 outings. One of their better young arms. He's shown himself well in the last couple of outings. A lot of people love what Owen Casey is doing down on the farm. We'll see what some of these other young guys develop into, but we will see. I think Jesse or Jed may have said this with Cap. He doesn't know which one will be great, but he thinks a few of them will be great, if that makes any sense. And the Cubs are pretty deep. And I told Nick, I go, this isn't the NBA. Like, you don't necessarily have to have 1 or 2 great players to win a championship.
I would be more critical of their unwillingness or lack of willingness to spend money, not necessarily on superstars, but on needed components.
Right. And like I said to him, I go, you can have a gripe with them. Have they spent enough on the pen?
Yeah.
Or should they have gone more in on another starter? That's all fair. But to say, like, if the criticism is, do they have a true superstar? I don't know if that's really fair right now, because their depth in their starting lineup offensively is pretty good, where the length in their lineup is good these days. And Morel may end up being one of those players that turns into a star, and he goes, well, I can assure you one thing, in a couple of years, no one's really coming out to Wrigley Field to watch Christopher Morel play. Like, A, do you even know that? And B, how many baseball players are there these days? And then I said, look, the Angels had Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, and Albert Pujols at one time.
Yeah.
And what did they ever win? This, like I said, this ain't the NBA. That's not how you win in baseball these days.
They had Rendon as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they still do.
Yeah. Oh, they still do.
Yeah.
I know, but I mean, like, he was still hitting.
On paper, they spent money, and they had a lot of names you knew. Like, and what has Mike Trout ever won? So you got to build a really good baseball team, and I like they still have spots they've got to improve. Justin Steele was a guy who was a finalist for a Cy Young. I'm not telling you the Cubs don't have holes, but to say do they have a true superstar? I don't know if that's necessarily the criticism that is the criticism that you want to go after right now about the Cubs.
Yeah, I mean, how many games have they played as well? I mean, like, look, you're so early into this season. You don't know what's going to develop. I love watching Morel play. I just like guys who play with that kind of enthusiasm and that passion. For your guys' sake, I would hope that some of the valleys would be eliminated this year, because he is a bit of a roller coaster. What, he hit 25 or 26 home runs last year, but he's going to go 0 for 13 at times with 10 strikeouts.
Sure.
Maybe some of that gets eliminated, and he evens some of that out. Exciting player. I mean, young player, exciting player.
Still developing. Like, he still didn't get all the consistent at-bats